Thank you, Zoom. um, so yeah, just a little bit about me, just so we get a little bit of perspective as to where I'm coming from and how I landed on doing something like this. So going way back to the beginning, again, my name is Pablo Siqueiros. I use he and him pronouns. I am San Diego, a San Diego native. I know Jared is as well, right? But I was raised in Mexico for most of my childhood up until I was about 12 years old, then came to San Diego, then to actually live there, and was there pretty much all the way through the end of my undergrad. I did not think that I was going to pursue singing right when I got into college. I thought I was going to be a choir director because I had a really wonderful choir experience in high school, and that was sort of the only job that I could kind of envision, not knowing that singing was a career path. It wasn't until I was about halfway through my undergrad, and when I say halfway, I mean almost 4 years into it, that my voice teacher kind of introduced this idea of singing as a career. And I was like, sure, I'm already 4 years into this, why not? So made that switch, went on to grad school in Chicago at Roosevelt University, did my 2-year sentence there, then got my first gig at Florentine Opera in Milwaukee, where I did the Young Artist program there for a couple of years. And in the summers, I was doing some smaller young artist things, kind of out and about. But there I got sort of my first taste of kind of the education side of opera companies, which I had not realized was a thing. And I really enjoyed it. And that sort of sparked my interest as maybe something I would rather pursue than my singing career. Singing full-time, to me, felt really daunting and very overwhelming to have my livelihood depend on my singing. That put an added layer of stress onto something that I really enjoyed doing, and it became no longer fun for me. It was a chore to get up and practice, to get up and perform. And anytime that we were in a production, I was literally counting down the scenes, counting down the performances until it was over, just to get it done with. So that to me said a lot about, okay, do I really want to pursue this for the rest of my life? But there was this kind of other avenue that opened itself to me when I was at Florentine, and kind of the rest is history. That I managed their education programs for 2 years and then moved here to the Twin Cities and have been at Minnesota Opera for about 4 years now, which is where I met almost all of you in some capacity, in different capacities. So yeah, so that's a little bit of kind of what I'm bringing to this discussion. And sort of outside of the singing world, I about last summer, spring into summer, I did a training program to become a dialogue facilitator, which was kind of introduced to me by a friend who was already involved in that organization and said, hey, I think you would really enjoy this. I think you already have a little bit of some of those skill sets as someone who's often in front of classrooms or in educational settings. And that opened up for me a new way of talking about different things that we find important. So for us, we know that our art, our music, our singing, our playing is very important to us, and it holds a lot of weight in our lives. but one thing that has always been sort of apparent to me, and especially the longer that I work in opera, is that it sort of feels like between the academic side of things from our training to young artist programs and things like that, there's a lot of things that are kind of decided for us as artists, whether it's by the curriculum that we're taught, the whatever the season that's being produced at any given company, whatever vision by a director or any of those things are all, we don't necessarily have a lot of say in those things. So it's, to me, I've always found it really challenging to sort of develop my own sort of artistic statement in terms of like what it is that I believe and why do I do this? Why does it matter to me? Why should this matter to other people? How does this fit in the fabric of the society that we live in? Is this just about me? Is this just about the camaraderie in the rehearsal room? Is this just about the aesthetics of it? There's so many different questions that I didn't really have a lot of answers to. And so through kind of the developing this workshop, I first developed it for high schoolers for our opera camp for Minnesota Opera. And it actually went surprisingly well. They all felt, they all gave us really wonderful feedback afterwards. And so we figured, why not try this with grown-ups? So that was my long spiel. We're going to start actually by introducing ourselves, everyone on the call. I would like for you to tell us your name, your pronouns. Maybe let's do an artist who has deeply impacted you. It doesn't have to be classical or opera. It can be any artist. It doesn't even have to be like music or anything. And then give us 3 adjectives that you would use to describe that artist. Who would like to go first? Jared, why don't you go first?
Okay. Hi, my name is Jared Miller. I use he, him pronouns. Gosh, an artist that influenced me would probably be Alicia de la Rocha. She's a Spanish pianist. If you never heard her play, you need to hear her play. She's amazing. And then 3 adjectives that describe the artist, you said? I would say she's very, I always found her playing to be very human and very, this is like a dual one, but like, she was always able to conjure like pictures in my brain better than other classical pianists that I listened to. So I don't know if like evocative is the right word for that. And then I guess honest too would be my other one.
I love that. I love that the first word that you used was human. Great.
She really like shaped my entire trajectory. So that's a good.
Amazing. Yeah, she's not someone that I've heard before, so I'll definitely have to check her out. Who would like to go next?
I'll jump in and I will say Victor Borga. If you don't know Victor Borga, was a Hungarian pianist slash comedian, and I really appreciate that he's very polished, but he's also fun and quirky.
Polished, fun, and quirky. Nice.
Are you familiar with Victor Borga?
I feel like yes. And I don't know. I'm like blanking on like what I've heard.
You've
If
probably
I've heard
seen like
anything.
the hands-off sketch where there's a soprano singing Caro Nome and he keeps interrupting her, but he's such a brilliant musician and so very talented and good at what he does. You can tell he practiced forever, but he's a prime example of classical music not taking itself too seriously, and I love it.
Nice. Who else would like to go?
I can go.
Great.
I'm Amanda, she, her. And I think that Tina will attest to the fact that I most often come back to Stephen Sondheim. Did you think I was going to say that, Tina? His work is, it was the first musical theater, and I grew up doing musical theater, but that was the first musical theater that I saw that felt like it had struck this balance of the elevated, enhanced quality that we go to the theater to see and the authentic truthfulness of straight theater. And I really appreciate that because both musical theater and opera are genres that are really easy to go way too far on one side or the other of things and lose some of the truthfulness. So I would say that he is also honest and curious. And oh fuck, I had a third one. It was really good too. Damn it. Honest, curious. If I say evocative, I will have stolen 2 of Jared's adjectives. This cannot be. But it's basically that.
Like, was there a different word that you were thinking of?
Yes, it was like slightly more nuanced, and I just can't. I can't think of it.
Why don't we do this? We'll leave that one blank for now. If you think of it, you can pop it in the chat.
I'll let you know.
Great. Thank you. Tina.
Oh, okay. So this is hard for me to come up with something on the spot, but I didn't really grow up singing classically. I didn't have training. I didn't really know I was interested in opera until probably a few years ago. And the first opera singer, before I really knew a lot of singers, the first opera singer that I really listened to was Renee Fleming. And she was also then, I just flew to Chicago a couple summers ago to see her perform at Ravinia. And then I waited outside the stage doors after, with my sister. I made them all wait, and like I saw her, and then like I just started crying. And it was just kind of like you see someone who's just like such a big influence on your life doing something that you want to do, and it's like you want to be them. And it makes me think of like the adjectives. Like one with her is that she's so elegant. She's not like, she's considered a diva, but she's not like flamboyant and in your face. And yet she's also like, she's very moving. Like when I watch her performances, I always watch her eyes, because I'm a big, when I act, for me, acting with your eyes is the most important. And okay, now let's think of a third adjective. Should be easier than this.
Just say evocative.
Evocative, yeah. I like that. I'll go with that. No. I think she's also complete. Like I kind of get just kind of well-rounded artistry from her. It's like I feel the acting, I feel the song, the singing. I saw her also in Light in the Piazza in Chicago last year, the year before. And that was like, oh, whoa, this is like a totally different, I mean, like it's musical theater. Yes, it's kind of one of those crossover musicals, but it was like, oh, look at, she's doing this, So yes,
Mhm.
complete. That's a pretty simple word, but hey, it works.
Unabashed. Love it. I'm writing that down. Sienna.
I remember the last time I did this, I said Carol, Vanessa, but I'm
Mhm.
going to pick something different. And I was listening to an album that I've listened to all since high school. It's by an Icelandic artist named Emiliana Torini. And she has 3 albums, and each of them is very different. The first one is kind of folky, it's guitar, it's just her and light accompaniment, and then she has like this techno pop album. But her style of singing and her music is something that really resonated with me and continues through the years. So she's been pretty influential, and I would say dynamic is one adjective to describe her. um, Creative, because she pursues all those different genres, um, and I would say self-actualized.
Say more.
I think that she very much understands like herself and is comfortable with where she is and like the music that she makes. I like her social media presence as well. She just seems like someone I would really want to hang out with and have like a genuine in-depth conversation. So I really
Mm,
appreciate that about her.
lovely. Oh, all such like different answers, and I love the words that each of you chose um, for your people. So we're going to use a little bit of this in our next section. So the workshop itself, we're going to divide it into a few different sections. I think the most important, or one of the most important parts about creating an artist statement has to do with self-awareness. And so the first section I've titled, "Who are you?" The one after that is going to be, let me see, oh, how you think about your art. The third one is the purpose of your art. And then towards the end, we're going to talk a little bit about how we might tailor these artist statements for different uses. So in this first section, oh, one thing, if you have anything that you can write with, whether that's just like an open Word document or you have a notepad or something like that, that would be super useful. Because I'll be asking you to take some personal notes for yourself. They don't have to be things that you share out loud. If you want to share out loud, you're more than welcome and encouraged. So the first question that I have, and we're going to do this as sort of a discussion. After I ask the question, I'll give you sort of a couple of seconds to just kind of think about the question. Then we'll open it up to any thoughts that you might have. If you want to write any of that stuff down. What I really like about having the discussion element is that oftentimes someone else says something that really makes you think about something new, or maybe something that you hadn't thought about, or makes you think about something in a different way than you had thought about it. You're like, oh, I also feel like that, or this made me think of this other thing. So that's why I like the discussion element of it. So the first part is kind of similar to the question that we just did, except I'm asking now for 3 adjectives to describe yourself, and or 3 adjectives that have been used to describe you, in case you can't think of anything about describing yourself. There's going to be a second part to this question, but we'll start with just this. So 3 adjectives to describe yourself, or 3 adjectives that have been used to describe you. Anything coming to mind?
I can go.
Yeah.
These are kind of ones that I think about myself and that I think I've heard other people describe as well. I'm very observant. That is the first one. I've been hearing that since I was like 3, I think, earlier actually. Self-aware and reflective were my other ones. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of thinking, sometimes to my detriment, but most of the time not. To the point that I feel like I'm very aware of a lot of the things that I do, and I don't do or say things very often without thinking through them first, which is, kind of a double-edged sword sometimes, but it's been very helpful for the most part in my life. And the other two kind of feed into that, and that it's all one big, constantly swirling maelstrom of every possibility going on in my head at once.
So it was observant, self-aware, and
Aware and reflective.
Reflective.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And you already answered my follow-up question because I was going to ask, where did those words come from? So you already gave us the answer.
Oh, great.
Sienna, is anything coming up for you? I hope you're doing this from scratch and not just rewriting what you did last time.
Look at that. Scratch. I'm going to see if I feel any differently about myself this next time around.
Yeah, because how long ago was the other workshop?
It was in my old notebook ago. So this one was started in April, so was before April.
All right, so let's see if anything changed.
Entertaining. That was what an ex-boyfriend once said when my sisters asked him why he was dating me, because I was entertaining. That's a big one in my family we still talk about.
Okay.
I think I'm open-minded and reflective. I have that same one written down.
And where did those two last ones come from?
I grew up in a much more conservative environment and, raised Catholic, and it was really probably going to music school and studying music that expanded my horizons to just not all white Catholic people. And so a lot of my family has not gone on that same journey that I have. And I think as a result, I'm much more willing to see gray and not just categorize one thing as black or white. And reflective, I'm very pensive as well. I think a lot, and I think that it comes off as my resting bitch face sometimes, but it's just because I'm caught thinking in my head and I'm just have dead face. Yeah.
I think there are kinder words that you can use to describe that face.
I'll work on that.
I also used to be described as dead face, so I feel that.
I can go. I did what Jared did and tried to use words that I both think of myself and have had confirmed back to me. So decisive, and I think that this shows up in different areas, some more than others. I have a tendency to pick an idea and latch onto it, even if it's not permanent. I get on a track and I stay on that track to follow it through. This does not apply when I think about what my career looks like, because I'm all over the place. But I tried to think of a word to describe feeling things really intensely And the best I could come up with was sentimental without going to thesaurus.com. But that doesn't feel right. It feels a little saccharine. And what I really mean is that I feel things really intensely. The feelings that I have are very much all consuming. And I tend to then want to put them somewhere, hence art. And I also almost wrote reflective. But after Jared and Sienna said it, I think it is slightly, like, I do get the whole like sitting and thinking and people being like, are you mad? But for me, it's more of like a front end. It's less like retrospective and more of a curiosity that comes at the beginning and kind of drives me forward. But I do spend a shit ton of time in my head feeling feelings very intensely and making decisions.
It's not a coincidence that all of you have reflective in some capacity. Like, this is a reflective activity that we're doing. So, and you were all drawn to it in some way. So, Tina.
Me, Tina?
You, Tina, yes.
Okay, me, Tina. Okay, the first one, the one that I came up right off the bat is something that I think of myself and that kind of is the number one thing other people will say, and that's compassionate. I think you can see that a lot from just like how I interact with people around me, but also like I kind of grew up in like a caretaker's home. And so it's just kind of something that's always been more important, I think, to my family is, you know, the people here. It might be a mess. There might be things that aren't pretty, but that's what you do, you know. The next one I would say is perceptive. I kind of say like my special like talent, if I can have one, I guess, is that I'm pretty good at reading people and reading situations that a lot of people can't really read. And so I think that I'm just very attuned to other people and their emotions and just very perceptive to that. And then the final one is not something that I would have ever used to describe myself. But I actually was told by some people when I graduated from this group therapy class, it was courageous. And that was never something that I would think about myself, because I was always like, I was the weak one, like in sports, I was always a little tiny person out there, just, I don't want to get too aggressive. And so I only saw courage in this one little box and saw so much weakness, like emotional weakness. And then all of a sudden I got to this point where like people were describing me as courageous. That was so new. But then I kind of latched onto that and found how you can be courageous in so many different ways that society doesn't necessarily consider courageous, but really is.
Yeah, I love that. I love when there's like new words that come up that maybe we didn't associate ourselves with, and that's gonna probably change over time, you know, for all of us. The words that we would use to describe ourselves 10 years ago are probably very different, you know. So the next question that I have is, what identities do you think about most often, and how do they inform the way you navigate daily life? And what I mean by identities are things like race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, where you were born, where do you live right now, your occupation, any of those things that you consider to be a part of your identity. So which ones do you think about the most often, and how do they influence the way you navigate daily life? All right, any immediate thoughts?
I can go. The three things that I think about the most often, the three identities of mine that I think about the most often would be mental illness, gender identity, and socioeconomic status. I grew up in a family where we always had a roof over our heads, we always had food on the table, but we also had to have food stamps to make that happen. And then I grew up in a more affluent part of town as well, which was just like one of those interspersed, like old house in a new development sort of thing. So I grew up around people who had a lot more money than me. I went to college with people who had a lot more money than me. And now, of course, we all are part of the declining lower middle class. So we all know what it's like to look around and be like, oh, way up there, someone has way more money than me. But that definitely has, I'll put a pin in that. I'm also a person with mental illness. I have known for a long time that I had anxiety and depression, but my diagnosis was tweaked to be bipolar 2 last fall. And I've always been really interested in psychology, not necessarily because of that, but just understanding the way I think, the way I interact with other people and the world and situations and the things that trigger me. And then also giving the benefit of the doubt to other people in the same way and being curious about how they experience any given situation and how that colors the interactions that they have, the choices that they make. And then gender identity. I am a female person and I have experienced sexual abuse and harassment and discrimination. Not surprising information. And I've witnessed it as well. And that makes you look at things differently. And when you combine all those three things together, you get a person who is on the lookout for injustices and very apt to call them out, but also to have compassion for the doers of the injustice, because I know that most harm doers are people to whom harm has been done. So yeah, I guess that's the best way to summarize that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Jared.
Yeah, so my first one is my identity as a pianist, as a musician. Mm-hmm. That has been kind of the driving self-identifier for as long as I can remember, really. It piqued my interest when I was 4 and has been a part of my life ever since. And it's kind of been the root of all of my self-reflection, all of the self-analyzing that I've done in what I do professionally, why I do it, who I do it for, like what position I hold when I'm up there on stage. All of that, it's tied into that identity. I could talk for hours about that, so I'll also put a pin in that. And then my next one is being Mexican American. I am half Mexican on my mom's side, and I'm very proud of that. And it has been something that I've really tried to explore more in the last 8 years, especially since I went to college and started really carving out who I was. And that has also obviously leaked into my professional and musical identity, as it's been something that has been a driving inspiration and passion of mine in my music as well. And also just sharing food with people. That's become kind of my favorite thing to do, is if I go to someone's house, I'll be like, oh, do you like salsa? I'll make you salsa. Or oh, I want to try this new recipe out on you. Can I bring it? And it's a wonderful way to both explore that part of myself and also share it with others in a very unashamed way, And then my last one would be that I am a gay male. And I put that one third because it's always been present, but it's never been at the forefront of who I am. When I introduce myself to someone, the first thing I would say would be pianist. The next would be that I'm half Mexican. And then maybe I would say that I'm gay, probably now because I would mention my partner and what he does, but kind kind of going with those last two of my Mexican American identity and my queer identity is that I recognize that I am in a position of privilege and that I have never been discriminated against in either format as a gay man or as a Mexican. I know people who have been, and so I try my hardest to also be aware of those things in every way that I can and be somebody who those people who have felt those injustices and those discriminations can come to and talk to, not even necessarily for advice, just as an ear. But I also try to be aware of it because I have not experienced that myself, and I realize that is a big privilege.
Self-awareness in that, and I love that. Tina.
Well, I feel like I don't really have anything. Like, I don't know how to identify myself. Yeah.
Would you say maybe your identity as a student is an important one? Or
see, I feel like a lot of my, like maybe some of my identities, just like they're not like something that influences what I do because I don't acknowledge them. Or it's kind of like, if something makes me who I am, it's like I come from kind of like people where it's kind of like, okay, if there's something wrong, you keep it under the surface and you don't like show that. And so it's just kind of, maybe it's that part that you need to kind of like, there's a certain amount of vulnerability you need to be able to express that, like those parts of yourself. And those are just like things that I have not been able to do yet with like the public and my identity outside of just like in my head who I am.
Yeah. And that's a really great way to start exploring that, of just like asking the question and just kind of sitting with it for a while. You certainly don't have to come up with an answer right this second, and certainly don't do it for our sake. But yeah, think about, what are the things that make you you, that make you a unique human being. I think you'll find a lot of things that are either whether it's your upbringing, your experiences, what you've chosen to do as a profession, that in some way kind of have an influence on who you are as a person. So yeah, just something to think about. You don't have to give us an answer.
Well, it's like one thing that I think of is like some things, it's like that are such huge identifiers in my life. It's like I don't want those to be. And so it's hard sometimes to figure out what's like, I guess I can be completely honest, and like mental illness has been a huge part of my life, but it's something that like, once you hit rock bottom and it's like you come back up and it's like so many years of coming back up, but it's like I don't want that to be my identity. I want to be where I am now. But yet so much of that influences your art and who you are every single day. And so that's where I find it's like I'm walking on a tightrope. Like how much should those things influence me? Do you forget them and leave it in the past and keep moving forward? Or is that so central to who you are that you can't quite let go?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to ponder over for yourself, because I do think, in all of this, you have all the right to self-determination. You get to decide whether it is a big part of your identity or not. Yeah, just food for thought. Sienna.
I just want to point out that Mezzotina said some things in the chat that you are a woman and a caretaker, and I want to add you're an intern. I mean, why was that not the first thing that you identified yourself with? But in all seriousness, you can write your own story. Like you can say and believe whatever you want to about yourself. So you don't have to feel like an identity is a weight that's carrying you down, because you can apply a lens through which you view that experience, and as a result you can say like I'm gritty, like I'm a person who keeps determined to do something and pushes forward. um, Back to me to say that horrible transition. um, a woman is definitely something that I identify with, and it's a filter through which all experiences go through. Just last night, like I was camping, and you, as a single woman alone in the woods, like you are constantly filtering every noise you hear if you're like, who's coming to assault me, which might be unreasonable, but it's still, a filter through which I experience the world. Singer is very high on that list as well. And then having not been outside really much the past few weeks and having gone out yesterday, I see nature as just a huge part of who I am, and that rejuvenates me and makes me feel connected to the world. So I guess woman, singer, and naturalist would be my three.
Very nice. Great. So the next question that I have for you guys in this section is, what did you have to learn about yourself in order to get to where you are now? What did you have to learn about yourself to get to where you are now? And y'all can just answer whenever you're ready.
I got one.
All right.
This this came really quickly, actually, because it's a recent learning.
Mhm.
So if it's not apparent, I'm pretty raw and filterless in how I like talk about myself, and that was not always a good thing. It did not make me friends in school. From a very early age, I was the oversharer. I had boundless energy, and people didn't always want. Not everybody's here for that. That's not everybody's vibe. So recently, I think probably a little bit during the pandemic, I stopped filtering myself, because I did. I mean, like, I'm sure you wouldn't know it to look at me, but I was actively retreating, because I had learned enough times that 100% Amanda is too much percent Amanda for a lot of people. And that sucks. It sucks to be rejected. But I think I overly internalized that for myself and spent a lot of effort and years trying to be something else instead of just what I was. And kind of to the point of like these three identities, or like the ways that I move around in the world. Once I just said, okay, so, and a big part of it was when I got my diagnosis. When you get a diagnosis like that, you think, oh my God. So all of the times that I made an enemy, all the times I had a fight, all the times I made a mistake or did something stupid or said something stupid or hurt someone, were they mental illness or were they me? And you spend like 3 days just running over every bad thing you've ever done and going, oh my God, is that because I'm crazy? And the question, is it me or is it mental illness? The answer is yes. And that's okay. And once I kind of put my finger on that like all of these things are me, and that's, and like for better or for worse, that makes me exactly who I am. And exactly who I am can bring exactly specific things as gifts to my work, to my artistry, to the people I interact with. And I started getting feedback from all different areas of my life that my perspective was so unique. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing. And wow, it's so nice to have someone be so open. And all of this feedback is the exact kind of stuff that I've been trying to repress in myself, because when I was a kid, nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So long story short, the realization was authenticity is king, and just being willing to be warts and all yourself.
Yeah, I love that there's sort of that underlying current of worthiness, like being worthy with everything that we bring. I love that. Who else would like to go?
I can go. I have two kind of main big ones. They kind of go hand in hand, so I'll talk about them together. But that it's okay to be a little selfish and to be forgiving and patient with yourself. These have been like constants in my brain for the last, I would say, especially since from when I started my master's until now, so like 4 years now, they've been like always at the forefront of my brain. In that I used to put a lot of pressure on myself and set unreasonably high standards for what I needed to achieve, both like in school and in my music. And anyone who has been on the solo pianist track knows that like perfectionism goes hand in hand with thinking you're going to be a soloist and all of that jazz. And I definitely had that. And going into college, I hated it. Like I thought that I was going to love being a solo pianist, and after my first year I was just like ready to stop. And my teacher was like, well, you've been playing for all your friends, like why don't you just do collaborative? And I was just like, I didn't know that was a thing. So I switched to collaborative. But collaborative was like, it helped me in that sense, and it helped me with the selfishness bit, in that it's okay to say that you're doing music for yourself. It doesn't have to be for somebody always, and it doesn't have to be for that toughest critic in the room, because I mean, I don't know if paradox is the right word, but it's like you are your toughest critic. So in a sense, you are playing for yourself. But if you stop thinking of yourself as your toughest critic and start thinking of yourself as your biggest fan, it really shifts things. And, you know, I used to come out of every performance being like, okay, these are all of the things that I did wrong. I need to improve on them. And now I'm able to leave every one of my performances and be like, I feel really proud of myself. And I can list more good things than bad things now when I leave a performance. And I didn't used to be able to do that. And I know a lot of people who still don't do that. And allowing myself to be selfish and allowing myself to go out on the stage and say, yes, I'm doing it for the people out there that are listening. But first and foremost, like, I started playing piano because I needed a way to express my emotions that I wasn't able to do like just in day-to-day life. And piano has always been that safe space for me. So that's first and foremost. And then the bubble extends to my partner, because it is a partnership when you're making music. It's you and this other person doing this thing that not everybody can do at the same level. And it's a real privilege and a gift to be able to do that and to be able to create that space for people to have human reactions and human responses to what you're doing on the stage. And all of that kind of came from me allowing myself to be the center of it, in a sense. And like the forgiveness and patience with yourself also came from my master's, in that I was so overwhelmed with how much music I had to learn and how much difficult music I had to learn in such a short amount of time, that those high standards that I had set for myself just became completely unattainable, even though they were already unattainable. But I like started to realize that I was never going to have enough time to get every piece of music that I learned to the level that I deemed performance ready. And it transformed into this mentality of like, why have I practiced piano for 20 years now? Why have I put how many thousands of hours into practicing and technique. And it's so that I can give to the music what I need to give to. Like you put in the time, you put in the fundamentals and the technical work so that you can just trust that your body's going to know what it's going to do. And you get to a certain point before a performance where practicing doesn't really do you any good anymore. And you need to be focusing on the intent and the story that you're telling and who you're telling it with and why you're telling it, and forgiving myself for not putting in the amount of time that I thought that I needed to put into music really ended up making my music a lot better, I think. And it was a long journey to get there, and I'm still there, but like it's helped.
Definitely. There's definitely a lot in there that I personally resonate with as well. Thank you for sharing that. Tina.
Okay, so the one thing, well, I've got two different things. One is learning. I think that me learning that I am resilient has been so influential. The fact that it's just kind of like you continuously overcome things, that the next time there's some big roadblock, all you have to say is, I'm resilient. Like I overcame this. I can do this too, you know? It's just kind of like there were just these constant things of always, I mean, even before I went to college, I didn't even think I was gonna get to go, well, like I didn't think that I was gonna be okay enough to go to college. And then I made it there. And then I'm on this, then I'm in this music department that I'm like, okay, well, I thought I wanted to go the musical theater route. And now everyone here sings classical music. And so I was just like behind, so behind for that year. I mean, I remember the number of times I cried in the practice room. Oh my gosh. But it's like, then, you keep overcoming these things. And then by the end of it, you're like, okay, well, I overcame all this. I can keep going. And then kind of tied into that is that sometimes when you have these things that you're just like, you're not good, well, you think you're not good at, and things that make you kind of want to give up and stop right there. Like one of those things for me has always been just like people in my family who say, like, don't go into music, you can't be a performer. Music is a hobby. And so like hearing that constantly, and then having the threat of like, okay, well, I'm, this like invisible threat of I'm not gonna talk to you if you don't listen to me and you go into music. Well, then all of a sudden there's all of these things that you're weighing about like what's worth it. But at the end of the day, I've had to learn you just have to be okay with yourself and what you want to do. That the sooner you stop listening to what everyone else wants you to do, the better. And I have to keep telling myself that constantly because I'm a huge people pleaser. I want to do what other people want from me. I don't want to make enemies. Like everybody just like me. But at some point you have to say, well, stop listening to what everyone else wants you to do and like take control, do what you want to do. It's your life. You have to be okay with all of that. And I think that that's the key message that's like kept me going on this path of, even though everyone is saying, oh, don't do that, you're gonna live on the street and be a starving artist. And then eventually you just gotta say, well, it's my life. I'll figure it out. This is my choice.
Mm-hmm. And look at all of us living on the street. Sienna.
Oh man, I've had to learn so much, but I'll share a few things. That perfectionism is toxic, and I think that it is such a prevalent thing in the classical music world. But understanding that control is just another form of resistance. And much like Jared, I had to change my relationship to what a performance is. And what really changed things around for me was, going into these rehearsals of Bohème with Theater Latte Da, my goal was to make 3 mistakes each time, because it's live theater, shit happens, it never goes the way you think it will. And so by changing that relationships to mistakes as oh no, I just messed up, and you're thinking about that when you have to be actively singing. Instead, it was like, oh, one down, two to go. So understanding that my thoughts are just a suggestion, like those, just because I think it doesn't mean it's real. And I can choose how I respond to that thought if I'm going to engage it. Is it serving me? But there have just been so many ingrained negative thoughts that I've had to weed out, and build that compassion for myself in that journey of like, oh, little Sienna, like that was something you used to say, and that's not very nice. Like you would never say that to someone you cared about. So why are you letting yourself say that to yourself? Like I I should be my best cheerleader, not the person in the corner who's like, fail, little. I just scared my cat. Sorry. um, and yeah, so I guess what that really all comes down to is knowing yourself, um, and have a compassionate knowing of yourself.
Thank you. So I want to take the next 2 minutes to kind of wrap up this "Who are you" section. I'd like for you each to write one sentence that encompasses the answers that you've given for the last 3 questions. It's going to be a clunky sentence. It's going to be a run-on sentence. But I'd like for you to write all of these things that you've just shared about the words to describe you, what parts of your identity are most present for you, and these things you've learned about yourself along your journey in one sentence. So I'll give you two minutes. It's not going to be pretty. Don't try to make it perfect. Do 30 more seconds. Okay. Does anyone want to share their statement, sentence? Anyone? Any takers? It doesn't have to be a finished product.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate it, but here it is. I'm a person who feels deeply, is curious about people, and who tenaciously and compassionately allows herself to lean fully into her identities as a working class woman with mental illness.
Okay, that was really smooth, actually. Yeah, that was like not even a run-on sentence.
I'm not sure that makes it good.
This is not about being good or not. Anybody else?
I can go.
Okay.
I didn't quite finish, but it's mostly there.
Yeah.
As a Mexican-American pianist, I strive to create a space with my art where people can feel comfortable breathing in and releasing the pressures of day-to-day life and sit in a space that is welcoming, familiar, or unknown.
Mhm. Tina or Sienna, want to share your work in progress?
Mine's very much rough, but as a recovering perfectionist, I aim to live fully in each unfolding moment and sing to entertain and.
Yes, and. Thank you. Tina, where are you at?
Okay, I guess here's what I am a compassionate, perceptive, and courageous female performer who has shown resilience against mental illness and persistence in her chosen life path despite voices silencing. Wait, what am I writing? Okay. Her or my, whatever that works. Life goals and dreams.
Yeah. Yes. Yes to all of these. Okay. We're going to put this section aside and move on to kind of how we think about our art. This last section was all about you as a person. Now we're going a little bit more into our art making practice. So the first question here, and we'll probably have to move through these a little bit quicker just to make sure that we finish up before the 2-hour mark. But the first question here is, what artistic output are you most proud of and why? And that's.
I can go. I think this answers that. The artistic output I'm most proud of is probably showing vulnerability up on stage. I fully admit that I have cried during my own performances before because something has come into my mind that has made me cry, and I'm okay with that. Like, I don't think that you need to be stoic up on stage, and yeah, that sometimes brings your audience in more because they see like, oh, he's not just like part of the piano or whatever, like he's a human being too. And yeah, I think that's probably what I'm most proud of when I perform.
Okay. Thank you. Sienna.
Mine is not going to be singing related. It's going to be founding Oops and building it to what it is now. Kind of every step of the way, there was a part of my brain that screaming like, "What the fuck are you doing? Quit! You're dumb. You can't do this." And I've just kept pushing through that. And it's been through like the help of the people that have gathered around me, like Tina and one of our other board members, Chip. Um, but I'm proud of creating a vehicle for having, some onus and power into the hands of artists to make things that matter to them. And I feel like we're, getting to a point now where people are coming to us with ideas, and I'm just glad that we can inspire artists to, be more empowered in what they create and why they create it and who they're creating it for, which
Mhm.
is something that has been so disconnected from opera, especially from the perspective of a performer. You just show up and sing the role that they told you to learn. Um, so to be a part of that changing tide is gives me a lot of sense of purpose, and yeah, I'm proud of that. Proud of
Yeah,
others. Thanks,
definitely
Tina.
something
Proud
to
of
be
the
proud
movement.
of. Tina or Amanda?
I can go. I grew up doing performing. I also thought that I was going to do solo singing work for about a semester. And then I was like, well, this isn't fun anymore. So I can relate to that. But I found myself doing directing after college. And that is still my most proud artistic output, is my directing work, for two reasons. Altruistically, I love that I have an ability and a propensity for drawing out the authentic, kind of comprehensive humanity of a story and potentially changing a heart with it, whether it's the performer or the audience or both. And then selfishly, it also gives me a safe, like relatively safer relative to performing, safe space to explore some of the really big, intense emotions that I have felt and been whipped around by, but to be able to explore them from this like third person perspective, this kind of inquisitive vantage point.
Mhm. Yeah. Tina.
I guess I specifically think of one moment in particular because I think I guess in terms of artistic output, for me, it's like all about connecting with the audience. And like if you have a big audience, and like when I'm performing, I think the first moment that I ever felt like totally connected, where I felt like I had like the entire audience in my hands. And for someone who always feels like no one ever listens to me, like no one cares what I have to say, this was the first moment that like I felt like these people are listening to me and like connecting to me and listening to what I have to say. Yes, through a character, but I was in the musical Sister Act, and I was singing this song, and it was like I just like one night I just like poured so much emotion out into this song and connected to it myself. And it's like the silence that I heard, like when it was done, it was just like those little moments that I'm like, yes, this is why I perform, and like this is what's special right here, is like I'm connecting. People are listening to what I have to say right here when I'm on stage. This is when people are listening, and that felt really great, and that kind of I think made me say like, okay, I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. And we have to listen to those things, which is great. Like just kind of listen out for those types of experiences where we're like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm meant to be doing. Um, the next question here, and some of you already sort of answered it in this last question, but when do you feel most connected to your art?
I think I would approach this from like two different angles. When I feel most connected to my art, like what type of situation would be like when I can recognize myself or someone that I know or some life experience that I've had in a story or a character, which for me is like always there. It just depends on like to what extent, how much am I identifying with it. And obviously the more I can identify it, the more I feel connected to it. And I would say that logistically, like literally when would be in the rehearsal process for me.
Yeah,
When you're
I
just
love,
kind of like chewing on it, you know, just
yeah,
really like digging around in the muck.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, mine are kind of similar. I to kind of use your words, Amanda, like logistically, the rehearsal process is definitely when I feel the most connected. I recall working on these Mumpu pieces with Rebecca Blackwell for one of my master's recitals, and she was the perfect partner to work on those with because the poetry was so just like heartbreaking and soul crushing and beautiful, but it was not something that you just show up, sing, and be done with it. Like our first rehearsal week was like 2 hours long, and we only talked about the poetry, and it was the best thing that I could have asked for that. And my second thing is like, I don't know how to. I'll try to explain this quickly, but like when the story is clear to me, I kind of discovered with my undergrad teacher that I very much like I'm very image focused when I'm learning a piece, to the point that like why I was having trouble connecting with my instrumental or solo pieces was because there was no like tangible imagery like you get with a poem. So I was having trouble putting the images together in my head to create a story through my hands. And so now knowing that about myself, like it's almost a more intense experience when I get to do that with instrumental music, because the story is not given to you always, and it's something that you have to discover with your partner and put together just by familiarizing yourself and acquainting yourself with the piece of music.
Tina or Sienna?
I can go. I actually feel the opposite for me. Like when I feel most connected to my art is when I have an audience and not in rehearsals. I find rehearsals very difficult, especially because I'm working with other people, and I'm just when I'm digging into a piece, it helps me to just like be in my own head and be alone to try things out for myself. I guess when I'm alone, I'm a much bigger risk taker, and I like to be very thoughtful and have things planned out. But then once I'm in a performance, I think that's when I'm most vulnerable. Just like something taps in. I think when there's actual people there, it's like I work off. I mean, I think a lot of people work off the energy of the audience, but for me, that's like the audience is such a crucial element to my art that like that's the only time when I really fully allow myself to just like open up and make the music come to life and like put all that meaning, personal meaning into it. And I don't know why it takes so long to get there, but it's always just like a total big change when you put people in front of me.
I agree. I think adrenaline and an audience kind of amps everything up. For me, it really comes down to the story, and if it's a story that I can kind of get lost in, um, like that fantasy realness. Um, but I know as a performer, you're supposed to bring all that even when it's not there, which is ironically also why I like chorus roles, because I feel the most freedom to come up with the most ridiculous backstory that doesn't mean anything to anyone else, but for me, it completely enriches my environment and how I interact. So yeah, I guess storytelling for me is the number one.
Um, what aspect of your, I mean, obviously this last year was very challenging, especially for artists, especially for those of us who were not able to um, do what we've always enjoyed doing. So what part of your art making practice did you miss the most when it was sort of taken away?
I can go right away, actually. I've thought about this so much. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, the interaction was the biggest thing for me. Like, I learned early on that I didn't like being alone with my music. Like, there are moments where I like that, but music for me was always a way to connect with people, either an audience or my partners. And having that ripped away was like, it was really hard. And as I know it was for probably all of us, but it was really hard to both not have the excuse to get to interact with people and not have my favorite way of interacting with people. And that's like, the heart of my title, like collaborative pianist, so that whole thing was just gone and it was really hard.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Just the being around people and making something together um, in person, because I've worked on a couple of digital things, and it's a totally different experience, and it's got its own merits, but it's not something that I'm as inclined towards because there isn't that tangible electricity that you experience when it's live and in person. I missed I miss that a lot. Like it's so good. It's such a high when you have it, and then they rip it away from you, and it's terrible. You go into withdrawals.
Mhm.
I third that.
I guess I have a little, being in school, and at least it's not like I had a ton of performance opportunities already. But the thing that I found that I missed the most was I had a couple of performances where we had to sing masked. And we had the masks, like the singer masks that were a little bit bigger. I mean, still not perfect. But what I found I missed the most was being able to use my face and have that physicality, just because I was singing this song that was just like so, like, this woman had cancer, like she knew she was dying, and it's like how you had to rely so much more on the voice and like what it could do without the physicality of it. But I came from a much stronger acting background, and so not being able to use my face and like have that connection was just, I could not stand it, and I missed it so much. And then the second that I was able to use my face again, I just relished in it because I just, I don't know, I just felt like there was that connection missing with people when I couldn't show my face. And like especially my mouth, that it's like this is what I'm using to sing, but no one can see it. It's like I'm hidden, like I'm hiding my instrument.
Mm. Yeah, things that we kind of take for granted, using your face. um, so the last question in this section of how we think about your art is, um, what makes your specific artistic practice um, unique? So this can be the way you approach it. This can be maybe how your identities interact with your art making. Maybe this is um, the product itself that you're putting out. I'm really enjoying all the different angles that you're all looking in to think.
I can go.
Okay.
So this is something that I try to do this, and I've also gotten this feed, like I wouldn't have known how to put this into words had I not gotten this feedback, but this is something I try to do. I really focus on character and psychology, like the nuances of character and the psychology behind a character, the full backstory of a character. And I really insist, particularly in opera, because what I've learned is that there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to how we educate opera singers in terms of acting. And I think most people will agree that like the music and theater departments don't hold hands, they compete for resources. And so there's not a lot of cross interaction there. So I find that I tend to be working with singers with less acting training. And so there's a lot of, you're in a short rehearsal period. You only have so much time to really externalize that which is otherwise internal. And because otherwise, why are we performing? How are we going to tell a story if it's just literally just your voice and what you feel inside yourself? That's a recital. That's not that's not a fully staged production. So that I think you're right. I think that like all of the things we've already talked about come into play here, really rooted in just the absolute compulsion that I have to go straight for the character and insist upon seeing it.
I think for me, I really try to focus on I don't know if holistic is the right word, but like the partnership aspect of it all, and that like equal parts in a performance and music making and all of that, and that, in ideal situations, I will show up to a rehearsal knowing the voice part, knowing the translation, knowing what they're saying. And I also expect that the singer or instrumentalist will know what the piano part sounds like, because I can't tell you how many times I've worked with someone who's been like, wow, I've never heard the piano part before. It's so cool to hear it. And they don't know where there's an interlude, or they don't know like how many measures they need to wait because they've only been looking at, 25% of the music. And that's like the more down to business part of that, but also that, which I have found helps with my performance anxiety that used to be a lot worse. I don't really consider myself to have it anymore, but I used to. And collaborating has helped that, in that you're not alone up there. And as a singer especially, you're almost never alone up on stage. Like either in a production, you have your castmates, or if you're alone singing an aria, like the orchestra's with you, even if they're not at the same level stage-wise as you. And in a recital format, like your pianist is your companion on stage. And I always try to remind, especially people that I work with who I can see are nervous when we go out, that like they're not alone, and that yes, they're the ones being vulnerable in the sense that they're using their voice and their body to produce music in a different way than I am, but we're out there together. And that's something that I don't see always, and I wish that there was more of, and that it's a partnership, and it's a collaboration, and it's a friendship, communion, whatever word you want to use for it. Like, yeah, it's a beautiful thing, I think. But
well, I love what you said towards the beginning of that, of like, it's not just enough to bring your own part to the partnership. It's about sort of taking a little bit of cross responsibility for the other person's part as well.
Yeah.
That I would say is definitely unique and would make for, I think, better art. Tina or Sienna?
Okay, I can go. I would say that the thing that for me is that, I think Amanda had spoken to it a bit earlier about kind of the acting, and that's kind of a lot of my background has been, I've done a lot of straight theater too. And like, to me, it's all about making the character a real person and someone that the audience can relate to. And, you know, I mean, even as a soprano, sometimes you play like silly, like caricatures of a person. But for me, it's always trying to find the element of humanity that everyone can connect to. Like, there's always some kind of underlying emotion or motivation or some kind of storyline that can drive the song. And to me, I kind of like tapping into that acting side and really figure out what the core emotion is of the character. And then, because that's, I find, what people are connecting to. I mean, like, I can go up there and sing a pretty song, but unless I believe it and can connect to it myself, I can't really convey that very well. Or, I mean, it might still sound pretty to listen to, but it's not something that's going to be moving to other people. I mean, that connects to, like, you know, the kind of artists that inspire us. For me, it's artists who are moving. Like, I want to feel something. And so that's what I try to put out too. And what I hope I put out.
Anna?
I don't know. And maybe that's what makes me unique, that I don't know. Is that working on spinning it that way? Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. It'll just be a question that you sit with for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So to kind of close out this section, we're going to do another one sentence exercise. This one is going to start with I value, fill in the blank, with the answers that you've given to the past 4 questions. So these are the questions of what artistic output are you most proud of and why? When do you feel most connected to your art? What aspect of your art making practice did you miss the most? And what makes your approach to your art unique? I'll be back in 30 seconds. I'm going to refill my water. Okay, anybody ready to share? Again, not looking for perfection in any way.
I can go. I value seeing and showing vulnerability, being able to share the story that I see and hear in the music, human connection, and a holistic approach to the process.
Yeah.
I'll go.
Hello, Kat.
I value musical storytelling and its power to change viewers.
Can you say that one more time?
I value musical storytelling and its power to change viewers.
Yeah. We'll talk more about power in a sec.
I'm so sorry. My call dropped, and so I missed the question.
Oh, that's okay. We were just doing the same exercise as in the first section of kind of combining the answers into one statement that starts with I value, fill in the blank.
Okay.
Tina, where's yours at? Again, it doesn't have to be done.
Yeah, it's halfway there.
Great.
I said, I value expressing vulnerability as a performer and unearthing the humanity in every character I portray, ...
Yes. Yeah. Awesome.
I don't love this yet, but I value authenticity and believe there is immense power in vulnerability and character nuance.
There is, yes.
I mean, I agree.
Okay, so the last section, before I get into it, does anyone have to like get off immediately at 9? Okay, we'll move along through this. So the last section is all about kind of purpose. So these are a slightly more philosophical type of questions, I guess. So the first one is, how does your art connect with the outside world? However you want to define outside world. In the interest of time, I'll take 2 answers for this one, and then we'll move to the next question.
I can go real quick.
Okay.
I kind of thought about it in 2 ways, in that with like my passion for Latinx and Hispanic music, I know I'm one person, but the more of us that study this music and perform it helps kind of chip away at the obelisk that is the like Western canon of white composers and white performers. And it helps broaden people's horizons and scope of what classical music is and just music in general. And then in this last year, I've been thinking about this a lot because I work at a high school now as a choir pianist, and I think about how my music and what I do reaches these students in a way that I can offer them perspectives that I wish I had when I was their age and going into music. And there are so many things like I wish people would have told me that to this day I have not been told and that I figured out on my own. And yeah, it's like a privilege to be privy to their curiosity and be able to help with that.
Yeah. Anybody else? How does your art connect to the outside world?
I can go. When I think about storytelling from the perspective of the audience, I wrote storytelling can cross genres and even cultures if the storytellers reach for the commonalities and embrace the differences between the story and their own lived experiences. Obviously, there's an extent to which that's true, and then there's sometimes, sometimes you go over really far to one side. But then for the performer, to have the experience of connecting in that way, it can sometimes unlock like a new depth of feeling and a new level to which you can express yourself and see yourself in your own life, understand yourself.
Absolutely. We're going to move along to the next question here. At its best, what does your art have the power to accomplish? And you can define best in whatever way you want. Thoughts, ideas?
I think I have. Sienna, you can go. I speak a lot.
You should be speaking.
As
Catharsis.
Jared has never said about himself.
I know, right? Yeah, my answer is catharsis. Having done these performances with Skylark at a bunch of nursing homes, I think the prevalent experience I've had is women coming up and saying, my husband used to sing these songs, or they had some story about, the musical theater they had heard and how it just brought back all these memories that they hadn't had before. And I just would hug these older women and cry. And it was just so cathartic, I think, for both of us, and especially the elderly, just being an isolated population for the past year and a half. I think having live singing in their environment again and music that they recognized and liked just was a very emotional experience that I don't think it normally would have been in any other time than in a pandemic or in the tail end of a pandemic. I don't know, however you want to think about what we're going through.
Jared, were you going to say something before?
Oh, sure. For me, it's actually similar to what Sienna said, in that for me, I think at its best, what I hope to accomplish with my music is that kind of what I mentioned earlier in creating a space for people to just feel something, even if it's not the same thing that I feel when I'm playing the piece. It doesn't matter as long as they feel something. And I remember, like, during my second master's recital, the big piece on the program was Trio Romantico by Manuel Ponce. It's an instrumental trio, and the second movement was my favorite movement. And if you haven't heard it, you should listen to it. It's absolutely gorgeous. But after the recital, my friend Natalia came up to me and she was like, Jared, that second movement it made me think of home, and it made me cry. And she's from Colombia, and she just, like, the folk tunes in it or something just resonated with her, even though it's, from a different place. It's a different ethnic composer. He's Mexican, but it still resonated with her. And those are the types of, like, comments that I love hearing from people. Like, I know when, you get the comments like, oh man, you sang so many notes, or wow, you played a lot of notes in that piece. And I'm like, thank you. I know, like, I know, I look at the music, but it's those comments that you get from people that are just like, I felt something when you played, that make me feel accomplished. as a pianist.
Yeah. I love that comment. Yeah. The next question here. So we, as artists, give a lot to our respective art forms. We put a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of ourselves into our art. What does your art do for you? Another way you can kind of take this is, what's the thing that keeps you coming back to your art?
I kind of already said this earlier, but
Mm,
it gives me the ability to articulate and investigate my own complex and intense emotional life and experiences.
absolutely.
For me, it gives me a place where I feel confident and heard. And it's kind of changed. Like, it used to be where I felt like it allowed me to be everybody except for myself. And so, like, it's almost like you could escape the confines of yourself when you're in a certain state and you just want to get out of it. But then I feel like I've kind of grown into, okay, maybe I feel like I can be my true and authentic self on the stage, and I just didn't always feel happy because I felt so confined in other places in my life. But on stage, it was like I felt kind of like at home in a way. And when you feel confident and heard, that feels like a safe place, even though you also feel like you're being judged every moment. um yeah, there is still some comfort in getting to be someone else, but ultimately expressing yourself through that other person.
Yeah. So I want to take the next couple minutes to, again, do a similar thing that we've done in terms of combining some of these answers into one sentence. Some options of how you could start this sentence are, the purpose of my art is ... The reason I sing or play is, I hope my art can blank, or with my art, I will blank. And we'll put these little starters on the chat. You don't have to use them. They're just options. Any volunteers?
I feel like I've said a lot, but I'll go. Through storytelling, I seek to open the pathways to empathy, self-reflection, and the full emotional experience of life for the audience, the performer, and myself.
Yeah.
That can go right on your website, Amanda. I hope my art can entertain, comfort, challenge, and start a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I hope my art can bring to others the same sense of healing, breath, and connection that it has brought to me my whole life.
So good.
That can go on your website too.
I need a website first.
We have a seminar for that coming up.
I sign up for that.
You're almost oops ready. Tina, anything for you? No? All right, well, with 5 minutes left, I want to just kind of talk through this last section. There's a bit that's going to be sort of take-home work, because the idea here is not to have this like pristine frame-ready statement. This is meant to explore some aspects of your art making, about yourself, about all of those different intersections, and kind of start that inner conversation about what it is that you do and why you do it and all these things. This is also a snapshot of where you are at this specific moment in time. The idea here is that this is a statement that should evolve over time with you, based on your experiences, how you're thinking of your identities at any given point, all of those things that we've talked about. And the other thing that's going to influence how this statement is going to look is what you're using it for. Kind of on a very practical note, you could use this on a website. You could use this on even a resume. You can use this in a job application, but it's going to look different in all of those different settings. Obviously, if you're working on a one-page resume for an audition or something like that, like space is at a premium, so you might not want to have something that's very lengthy. But I believe that something like some of the information that we've unpacked here through the questions that we've asked and answered, are going to tell someone a lot more than your resume will. I don't think companies in general are doing themselves any favors by only asking for what roles you've done and who you've done them with. That doesn't tell you anything about who that person is that you're bringing into your space, into your rehearsals, and introducing to your audiences. So I would think that more companies would want to do a little bit more of this homework on who they're bringing into all of those spaces. So, for example, if you're wanting to do this for a resume, combining these 3 separate statements into one more concise, obviously you're not going to be able to include every single detail that you've included, and probably some of it is more personal than you would want to share with a company. So there are certain things here that are going to be artist statements that are just for yourself too. Of just like, I'm going to use this as my measuring stick for making career decisions, but for making personal decisions that maybe intersect with my career in some way. maybe guide your own direction in your artistic practice. If you're using this for a website, obviously there you have quite a bit more room to work with. So you could even unpack all of these individual things into a larger, like, one pager or something like that. That makes me think of, like, when you go to any museum, and it's an exhibit by a living artist, oftentimes they'll have, like, kind of one big placard, like, in the middle, that's just them spilling their brains onto into words, as to, like, how they approach their art, how they see this impacting the greater community, et cetera. And then you have, like, the bits of information about each individual piece. So there are a ton of different ways that you can use this. And I think for the sake of this workshop, maybe choose one to explore. And you can either contact Tina Christensen and Sienna with whatever it is that you chose to explore. And if you would like to share that with them. And yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of ways that you can use this, that this can be useful to you. So I know it is 1 minute to 9 o'clock. So we made it. Thank you all for your vulnerability, for your openness, for your willingness to have these conversations in our kind of small setting here. And yeah, and any feedback that you have about how we did things today, you can feel free to share those either with me personally or with Tina and Sienna. So thank you all, and I hope this was useful.
Thank you.